Welcome to the Becoming Body Smart podcast, where we unlock the secrets of sustainable health and fitness and help you master your health habits. If you're tired of quick fixes, generic blueprints, and chasing short-term results, you're in the right place. It's time to become Body Smart.
So the article I linked is called Associations Between Nature Exposure and Health, a review of the evidence. So in preface to that, this is an article just talking about some of the benefits on health outcomes in terms of spending time in nature. Things like mental health, stress levels, just getting the recommended amount of physical activity. And the preface for this is... Okay, so I will continue. So I had been actually thinking about this yesterday. So there is, in North Salt Lake, there's a trail that I really love to go on. I'm going to drop a picture in the chat real quick. Oh, wants me to save that as a... Hold on just a second. Well, anyway, I will drop it. I'll drop it a little later. Let's see. I'm just gonna put it as a picture. So anyway, there's this hike that I love doing up in North Salt Lake. It's like straight uphill, but it ends in this. You can go on a lot of different trails. But there we go. There's the picture. So you can go on a lot of different trails. So when it gets to this one, it just kind of opens up into this valley, so you can see kind of City Creek on one side, and then on the other side, there's just mountains all around. You can go off and north. You can go south on some of the other trails, and so it's just this really, really pretty place. And so just packed a little camp chair with me and walked up there. It takes about 35 minutes to get from the base up to this area. Oh, can anyone else not hear me? Okay. Weird. Dan says she can hear me. Let's see.
Okay, we're good. Sorry.
Can you hear now?
I don't know what. Yep.
All right.
I can hear you.
Okay. So anyway, it takes about 30 minutes to get up to this area, but it's one of my favorite little hikes to do. And it's nice because it's so much uphill. It's basically 30 minutes of uphill. You don't have quite as many hikers on that trail, and so it just ends up being this really kind of peaceful, solitary hike. And I don't go up here often enough, but what I ended up doing yesterday was just hiking up there and just sat and took the view in for a while. There was some fall colors. You can't see it quite as well in this picture, but just some beautiful fall colors that were getting some of the leaves there. And then I just took a little journal and kind of wrote down what I was thinking and feeling, and it ended up just being this really nice break in the day. I probably sat up there for half an hour between just sitting there and taking the view in and writing in the journal. And it was cool. It was just quite a heavy breeze, but other than that, it was pretty quiet. You'd have the occasional sound of a plane overhead, or some bees buzzing. But other than that, it was just this really, really enjoyable time that I had in nature. And so I was kind of thinking about that during the rest of the day, and as we prepared to do the call this morning, I thought that would actually be a really great thing to talk about, of nature, its effects on our health, and just the idea of doing kind of a regular digital detox, getting out in nature outside of having any electronics, checking the email or scrolling the web, and just being able to like be with our own thoughts. And in conjunction with that, um, this paper kind of came up and detailing some of the benefits of being in nature. Like I mentioned, mental health being one of them, but also this myriad of other health factors that it talks about. Any thoughts on that, Cam?
Yeah, so I'm 100% in agreement with that. So I love being out in nature. I think the benefits are so multifactorial. I love getting outside. There's nothing like starting my day with a run up in the woods with my dog. Um, I I just love it. I like to go get lost in the woods, is what I say. Um, and sometimes that's literal, and sometimes that's more figurative. Um, but the ability to just get out and, like you said, let things go from a digital standpoint or from just a time and logistics and busyness standpoint, and just to kind of be out in it, I love it. And I've always thought that there were benefits, and just kind of assumed that there were, positive benefits from it. But it is cool to see the research that they're doing in that field. So this article that Mark posted is more of a summary article. It's not making any one point, but summarizing some of the literature that's out there about the benefits of being out in nature. And so, it's kind of nerdy. It breaks it down into like how they determine what certain age groups are, or what nature is, by based on, maps of certain hectares of land and the vegetation density index and all those types of things. So it gets a little bit nerdy in explaining like what nature is, which in a way kind of ruins nature for me when you have to count the vegetation index or whatever. Um, but what's cool about it is the different benefits that they find. Everything from lessened heart disease risk to, let's see, increased levels of physical activity, decreased cardiovascular disease risk, long-term effects of nature on reducing depression, anxiety, improving cognitive function, uh, limiting chronic disease, the effects of chronic disease. So, I mean, that's huge. Those are huge benefits. Um, if only that we're moving more, we know the benefits of moving more, of regular low intensity exercise brings about so many of these effects. And so I'm sure some of it is just that when you get out in nature, you have to move more to get out in it. Um, but some of it, I do think, is just the lack of pollution, the lack of, so environmental pollutants from pollution, but also like noise and light pollution. There is nothing like staring up at a starry sky where there's nothing else up, uh, kind of blocking that light pollution. Um, it's an incredible feeling to kind of recognize your smallness in a way. It's humbling in a good way, that you are part of something bigger. Um, and it's amazing to be in the Grand Canyon this last week. Was unreal to see the just grandeur of it, the size of the Grand Canyon, and to see like how we really are just little peons. When there's a view from when you make one of the first turns coming down the trail that first day, you can actually see where you get out the second day at 26 miles away, but you're high enough that you have enough perspective where you can see the rim of the canyon where you get out, not the second day, but at the end of that trip, you can see that spot where you hike up. And it's like a little daunting to think, oh my gosh, I got to make it all the way over there. And that is 26 miles. um, but it just makes you think of how small you really are in the grand scheme of things, which I think in a way is good. Like that, it's humbling, but in the best possible way. Um, I love that. I love being able to see like that view that Mark posted of just these massive mountains and these trees that look like it's just grass on the hill, but really there are these bushes and trees that are larger. And I don't know, there's something about kind of seeing your perspective to the world um, that makes, in a way, it's humbling, but in another way, it's like all these problems that I have in my life really are small. In the grand scheme of things, they're small. I heard a quote from or yeah, anyway, a quote or somebody talking about the astronauts when they were able to get the view from outer space, how it made the problems of life seem small when you had that bigger outlook, when you had that bigger view. And I love that concept of being able to see like the big picture and where I fit in the big picture. I think we get that more when we're out in nature and not just in the hustle and bustle and busy of schedules and appointments and ball games for me, um, ball games and meetings and appointments and calls and all those things. And so I love being out in nature and to see some of the effects of that it actually does benefit my health. That's a bonus too. So I don't know. Any thoughts, Mark?
Always thoughts. So as you're talking, this reminded me of, and I'll repost this later, but a while back on one of our calls, we had talked about some of the different brain chemicals that exercise helps with, um, but also just being out in nature, it affects many of those as well. But there were two. So sunlight, natural sunlight, um, helps with serotonin production, right? One of our contentment chemical. And then it's also involved in our sleep wake cycles, melatonin, right? And so you think for so much of human history, like our sleep cycles were regulated by when the sun went down and when the sun came up. Um, and so now with artificial light and with especially from screens, it's easy to stay up late. It's easy to stay glued to a screen of some sort, and our bodies need that the change in light, right? So what sleep scientists recommend is once you wake up, right, is if it's light enough outside, right? Some of us wake up before it's quite light, but just getting out and spending about 10 minutes in natural light, right, can help to um, get us feeling woken up, kind of get rid of that groggy feeling, and start us on the cycle for the day. And then, a couple hours before bedtime, dimming the lights, um, trying to use more of the warm red end of the spectrum versus the blue, right? That kind of keeps us awake and delays melatonin from being released. And so there's a suggestion on both ends, but then just um, getting sunlight is also good for vitamin D, right? Like there's lots of reasons to get out there, but I think again echoing what Cameron said about um, the perspective that it can give us on our problems, the different anxieties that we're worried about. I just as I was sitting up there, I had the distinct feeling of it's always easy to um, get lost in that comparison game, right? Where should I be in life right now, and what should I be doing, and what should I have, and what do I need, and right, and and to become very me focused, and and getting there, right? Like I said, one of my favorite places to be, honestly. Like I've done this hike so many times, um, and just thinking like, man, like I love this, right? I love being out here. Like this is this is what I'm searching for, right? Just this peace and this stillness and this quietude. Um, just being out there, and obviously like love being with other people too, but just to experience um, some of those moments of quiet and in just this um, place that's both touched by time and untouched by time in many ways, right? And so um, just highlighted the need for me to again disconnect. And so I think that as part of this call is a challenge to each of you to just um, find a time this week. I know today and tomorrow is supposed to be a little rainy, so but hey, just wear a rain jacket. As Cameron says, there's no bad weather, just bad gear. So
That's what I was just about to say. There's no bad weather, just bad gear.
there
You
you
just
go.
gotta get the right stuff, and then you're fine. And it's okay to have to wash your shoes off when you get back. Being a little muddy is kind of fun. Think of what you did as a kid when there was mud puddles. You jump in every one, right?
So true.
It's all right to have to clean off a little bit.
I did so the way I went down. It's fun. I ended up having to bushwhack a little bit because I was like, oh, there's another path over here. And it actually ended up being really pretty. It took me through this um, area that was just really dense foliage and had a bunch of the changing colors. And so I was kind of in this little tunnel of trees and leaves. But it had rained the previous night, so it was all slick. So I kept sliding down that, and I was just wearing my um, Tivas, and so my feet were like all covered in mud and everything. But it was super fun. It was great. And then I like wound up on the wrong hill, so I had to like go down this really steep incline to get where I wanted. But it was actually a really fun adventure. And so
Yeah. So you got caught by the deer trail. Is this deer trail an actual trail? And then it winds up dead ending into a big thicket, and you're like, oh my gosh. I've done that so many times. Like, oh, cool, a new trail. I've never noticed that one before. Then it's just a deer trail that's not an actual trail, and you wind up getting torn up. But it's fun.
Yep.
I love that. That's my getting lost in the woods.
Almost stepped on a cactus several times, but it was
Yeah, done that too. The rose bushes are the worst. I had this huge rose bush I got caught in one time that I just had to push through. There was no way back. So I had to push my way through this massive rose bush, and I was destroyed. But it was part of the fun. Now I have a good story to tell.
there you go. Stories. Oh, so this was. I'll dive back into the challenge, but this is actually one of the other interesting things about this. The study brought up was, there seems to be an effect of just being in nature, but that it's synergistic, or it can be with some of those other things, right? With just physical activity, makes people more likely to be out and active. One of the things that I highlighted in there. So it said this one study they looked at said children with greater than 20 minutes of daily green space exposure had nearly 5 times the daily rate of moderate to vigorous physical activity compared with those with nearly zero daily exposure. And so effects on activity. But then one of the other things that it mentioned was just opportunities for social connection. And so that can be, going
Yeah.
with people out in nature and spending time. But then, like Cameron said, like it's a great story. And so he has another way to connect with people in his life and to share that experience with them. And so that's another added benefit of being able to influence our relationships and um,
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting here reviewing some of the things that I highlighted through the studies. It's just crazy the amount of benefits of just being out in nature. We often take that for granted, but so for stress, so the article kind of goes through different things like stress and then affective mood, anxiety and depression, things like that. So measures of heart rate, blood pressure, perceived stress, um, and the perceived negative effects of stress are all reduced. Decreases in measured of salivary cortisol levels and decrease after exposure to natural environments. Heart rate variability increases, meaning uh, like our ability to kind of handle things is better. Like our vagal tone is part of that, what they call it. So it's kind of a measure of stress and just the overall load on our body. Our heart rate variability increases, though. Positive associations with positive emotions and negative associations with negative emotions. Like, we tend to be able to handle our emotions better when we have more exposure to the outdoor environment. Anxiety and depression, it decreases anxiety and rumination, which are associated with mental health outcomes such as depression and anxiety. So we don't get stuck on our negative thoughts quite as much, and we can handle that better. We find a reduction in depressive mood following short-term exposure to natural environments. Our cognitive function seems to increase. Um, I love that. Like, our brains work better. Statistically significant association with positive cognitive outcomes after short periods can be spent in periods of time spent in natural environments. So I just think that's cool. Brain activity, the prefrontal cortex and areas of the brain that plays an important role in um, emotional regulation seems to be stimulated, and there's alterations in brain activity in a positive way that help us handle emotional regulation better. Like, all these positive scientific benefits, blood pressure, like we mentioned before, our immune system. After a 2-day, 3-night trip to a forest area, blood and urine samples were taken, and people's immune system was essentially better during that time. Um, that's cool. Like, the fact that even our immune system is better. There's studies on post-operative recovery, mental health, like all these things. Physical activity, like we mentioned. Obesity is even lessened by people that are in those spaces more. Like, the sleep benefits, the cardiovascular disease risk reduction, lower rates of diabetes, lower rates of cancer, lower cause of all cause mortality. Like, all those things are pretty wild that there's associations with all of those factors. Um, I love that. To me, that's transformative. If just being out in nature can affect us in so many ways, and they probably all are multifactorial, right? Where they all kind of play into one another. The more you move, that these are all associations with just physical activity in general. But by getting out in nature, it's kind of like going to the gym. You're more likely to get a good workout in once you're there versus like I'll work out at some point in time here at home. Sometimes it helps us to go to the gym just so that we commit ourselves. Same thing. Once we get outside and in nature, we're more likely to spend time being active versus if it's just a treadmill run at home, which we can do, but it's a little bit harder sometimes to commit ourselves and to really go all in. Whereas once you've hiked up the mountain, you got to come back down. So anyway, I just, it's fun to see like all of these scientific like justifications for why it's healthy and why it's so good for us to do. So anyway, I
No,
just wanted to go nerdy for a sec.
yes, yeah. So I mean, if you're interested, take time to dive into that article because it does have some really interesting findings. Um, and so all that's just to say of like it is part of that re-energizing ourselves, right? Of
Totally.
self-care. And like I loved what Cameron brought up about the emotional regulation, because I think that's one of the things, and I know that I'm subject to this, of when life gets busy and I feel like I have all these things to do, the things that will actually help me handle that better often go by the wayside, right? So exercise, being out in nature, um, having social connection, all of that is associated with being able to regulate our emotions in a much more positive manner, right? So to have a little bit, instead of those bigs up and downs, right, to have a little bit more of that even flow of things. And so I think this is just a, when you notice you're feeling that pressure, right? Like maybe I'm having more trouble regulating my emotions, or I'm just feeling really, really worn out, um, low energy, right? Obviously, there's a lot of things that can affect that, but a simple way is just taking a break, spending time out in nature, right? Taking 10 minutes even, and just getting out away from technology and taking in nature around you. So Leslie, I'm walking along Utah Lake in the rain right now. I'm loving it. Yeah, I know it's, oh man, I actually love being in the rain. It's fun. I remember growing up in Texas, we used to have these big summer thunderstorms, and on our house there was this corner where the eaves came together and just made this little waterfall, and we used to love running out. We'd get in our swimsuits and run out under that, and it was a lot of fun. So I like that. So Camille said, can you talk about the difference between walking in a neighborhood versus hiking on a trail? Is there a big difference? It's so much easier for me to walk in my neighborhood instead of driving to the trailhead. Honestly, just the time spent outside. Again, whether you're on the trail or in the neighborhood, right? Having that natural light seems to be helpful, right? You're getting the exercise benefits. In terms of the trail, like you maybe a little bit easier to get away from some of the environmental contaminants, but honestly, like just being outside, going on the walk around your neighborhood, like, that can make a substantial difference.
Yeah.
And so again, I think this especially highlights the importance of the physical activity part of things. It's hard to disconnect the physical activity in these different studies that they looked at, and so any opportunity to just get up and get out and get moving is going to be beneficial for all those things that we talked about, right? For our cardiovascular health, for our stress, for our sleep. So many different things are mental health, right? Huge effects between movement and mental health. So being out in the neighborhood, Camille, honestly, is great, right? It's a
Yeah.
yeah.
So there are, in some of the studies, it doesn't talk about it with a lot of them, as this is just a summary. So it doesn't always give us all of you'd have to kind of click on each article to find out, but most of them, I guess in the ones where it addressed that, there is some slight uptick in being more out in nature. So there are some positive benefits for being out and away too. But like Mark said, a lot of the benefit is just getting out and exercising and taking a break from your normal stress and stressors and things like that. And like kind of Mark hinted to, the more you get out, the more you are away from the environmental contaminants, including like noise and light and traffic and, just all those things that may bring your thoughts back to your life stresses so that it's not as helpful at de-stressing. But just even getting out in your neighborhood, and green spaces can be things like parks and other things. Even some of the studies showed that just showing people um, pictures of plants did have some benefit, which is kind of funny. But then showing or putting them in an environment, even at their school, but with real plants, seemed to help. So just having them like take a walk through a terrarium or whatever in their school seemed to help calm their stress and regulate their mood better. So it doesn't always have to be that you're out away in nature. Although I do think, especially when we can, or if we have opportunity to do longer bouts out in nature, there seems to be some pretty good benefits of that. But it's not necessary to get all of that to be able to get benefit from that, I guess, if that makes sense. So I obviously it would be nice if we all lived right by trailheads and could go hike a mountain all the time. At the same time, I think anything we can get, just time outside instead of just worrying about our normal stresses and stressors and things like that, is always beneficial, always a good thing. So get outside any way you can, and the further outside you can get when you can is great.
One last thing that I'll add. This was one of the studies talked about it. And Like, what? So it talked about forest bathing, and I was like, is this a thing? Like, you find a natural stream and you go and bathe in the forest? Like, is that a thing? Maybe it is, but what this is talking about is letting this be kind of a sensory experience where you're just allowing yourself to be immersed in nature,
Right.
taking in the sights, taking in the sounds, taking in the smells, and letting it be a period of time where you're very present at hand with the things around you. And so focusing
Yeah.
on those things and letting that kind of consume your thought instead of all of the worries that we tend to carry with us.
Yeah.
And so I like that, right? Taking a moment in the time that you're out there to really take it in, to stop and smell the roses, as it were. Can
I
help.
kept trying to do that on our Grand Canyon hike, but the problem was the donkeys made it so that there were no roses being smelled. It was donkey urine. Donkey urine smells so bad. It was awful. They need to have somebody following up. So the problem was too is right now this time of year they're only hiking the donkeys down to like the first well, not the first, but the second water hole, which is usually like 3 miles down and then back up. And so at the hardest, steepest part, you have just piles of donkey manure and donkey urine, and the urine is even worse than the manure, but you're breathing so heavy, and then all of a sudden you come up on it and it's like, oh my gosh. So be warned, maybe bring a mask or something like a gas mask. It's awful. So yeah, I was trying to stop and smell the roses there, but it was not such a great smell. Yeah, seriously, something. I honestly did want to pull out my like hand sanitizer and stuff like that to I should have done that. Like rubbed my nose in hand sanitizer because it was bad. Anyway, sorry, that's a gross way to end the call. Right, right. Yeah, those mules, man. Woo.
But
Anyway,
moral of the story is just taking time out of your busy schedule, even if it's no more than 10 minutes, and getting out and get moving and get in nature, and if you can, spend some time in there, more immersed in green spaces. But just a call to um, take a moment to stop and press pause on all the things that are causing anxiety, press pause on all the demands on your time, and just take a little break for yourself so that you can go back re-energized and better prepared to meet the demands of your day and the demands of your life. So just get out there, make a goal this week to spend some time in nature, and then write down what that experience was like for you, right? Reflect on that, because as we reflect on our experiences, as we ponder them, that's one of the ways that we learn best, right? Is reflecting on our experiences, and that's a better way to integrate those types of experiences into our lives and into our regular routines. So get out in nature. The end.
get out. Get out of
Get
here.
out. Get out of here. No, well, thanks for joining us on the call. We look forward to the call tomorrow. We'll be talking about intermittent fasting, so that'll be a good one. That will be tomorrow at 5:30. So we'll catch you on that call.
Thanks for listening to the Becoming Body Smart podcast. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on our socials or join our community. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring you even more valuable content. Remember, sustainable health is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Live longer, live stronger, and become body smart.